You mentioned the five generation farm and the whole business of carrying on a heritage or carrying on a legacy. And I'm curious what the content of that is for you. I mean, in what way you see yourself kind of passing on a real legacy to your daughter?
Sure. I think in its simplest sense, that's physically being, at our family's roots where it all began. So I am fifth generation, my father being the fourth. And physically being here on the land, on that farm site where it all began is, in the simplest way, just having Amana grow up to know that, to know that area, to know the land herself, and to know how we're living off of it. That's where it starts. And then beyond that, there's a lot of traditions that my parents, even in their generation, I think especially have hung on to, that maybe others in their generation have left, whether it's picking apples and pressing, using an old wooden press to make apple juice, or raising hens, egg-laying hens and having chickens and picking eggs every day. Composting and planting native berries.
Tapping our maple trees.
Tapping maple trees and doing our own maple syrup run every springtime. Those are all the kinds of things that, even when I was growing up, were probably quite unique to my family, to what we were doing. And I didn't necessarily know that at the time. And now it's perhaps even more unique, in our daughter's generation, to still be seeing those things through. And to understand that a pickle comes from a cucumber that you pick in the garden, and to know where that gallon of milk is coming from, and how the egg got in that carton. Those are all things that I don't want her to not know when she's growing up. What she does with it, of course, is up to her when she's older, but I want her to know those things that my family has always known.
It's a really idyllic picture you've painted. I'm not considering moving anytime soon. I grew up on a farm. I left for a reason. I mean, it was, but when I left, my parents bought machinery. Before that, we did it all by hand. So it's a little bit closer to your African example.
Sure.
What I'm curious about, though, is what's been hardest for you coming back?
I think that a lot of it is, it's a couple things. A lot of it's the cultural diversity that isn't here nearly as much. It's not to say you can't seek it out, but certainly not, if you were in a metro area, cultural events and just meeting people from different walks of life with different interests. That's something I miss most of all. And I also miss being quite young, I think, out here. We don't have nearly the same number of young people our age with small children and growing families, versus, most people out here, the majority of the population is retired or close to retirement, and that's definitely been a big challenge as well. So it comes down to social aspects for us and kind of the cultural diversity. But one thing we do when we are feeling a little stir crazy, need to get out, go do something, we kind of remind ourselves we can always go to, whether it be, the Twin Cities area for the weekend, and get our dose of a fun music concert, or some other venue or something that sounds interesting us. We can go and do that, and we can come back to a daily life that we really appreciate. 9 years out of 10, I would rather be here and make that drive to go to these other scenes that I need to see, versus being in a really densely populated area. I would be wishing, I know that the grass is always greener. I know that if I were there, at times enjoying that diversity that's there, I'd be I'd be looking for wide open spaces and a nice big lawn for our kids to run around on.
The question was just what's been hardest. I'm wondering if that sums it up for you also.
Yeah, I think so. The physical proximity to people. All of my family is either in Colorado or out on the East Coast, and so I don't get to see my family very often. But I guess I've come to accept the fact that even if I lived, right down the street, I might not see them anymore. So I think I've kind of come to accept that. Because a lot of our friends and people our age, they always say, oh, I would never see anyone if I lived out there. And it's like, well, you live 5 minutes from them and you don't necessarily see them anymore. But I think people are just comforted by the idea that they can see them very easily and quickly and, within short, close proximity. So I think we've just come to make that realization that it's really not about how physically close you are. It's more just about making the effort to see people. And so one could definitely say that that is that is a reason not to live here. Or that is a challenge of being here, which is true. But I think you also make it. Each person makes it what they will, and it's always different. I don't know. There's definitely times where we would love to just be able to order pizza or Chinese food.
That too.
So I think it takes something that seems more commonplace and familiar to me now, but was initially a challenge, was just planning ahead. Because we only go. I mean, there is a very small grocery store about 6 or 8 miles from here, but for just about everything we need, it's probably about 60 miles, or a good hour and a half drive to
supplies for the business,
or groceries and shopping.
We prefer to buy organic and natural foods to do something like that. It's a trip. We can't just if we forgot the sugar, we can't run and get it.
Mm-hmm. And so I think the planning aspect was sort of a challenge for me initially, but it's something that I've learned to adapt to. And so we have a paper and pencil right there on the fridge, and so every time something pops up, I write it down, because I know when that one day finally comes, one day a month or every 2 months, that we get the chance to go into town and we can get everything we need for the coming month or two. But that initially was pretty hard for me, because I just wasn't in that mindset, because you live in the city and you don't need to think that way, because you just, when you need something, you just run out and get it right then and there. And then just the challenge, in the kitchen, I haven't always had the most effort in the kitchen, and so we make a lot of our own food, and we have a couple big chest freezers, and a lot of our meat we grow ourselves, and we raise a lot of our own livestock and meat, and so that's something that was, I guess, initially a big challenge, just planning all of our meals and taking the time to cook.
But as you're saying that now too, I think about raising young children in such a sparsely populated area. That's probably right up there also on the list of, I don't know, you might say drawbacks or concerns. It'll be great, I think, for her to go to a small, really strong rural school district and have that education, but this cultural diversity will be lacking in terms of Amana's life perspective as she's growing up, I would certainly, I guess, having grown up here, would hate for her to also feel that suffocated, kind of can't wait to get out of here feeling, which she might end up feeling anyway, but we would just love to see, I guess, more young families coming to the area, so that just in terms of kids growing up too, just have more opportunities, more things going on, I think, in general.
But there is also a very high teacher to student ratio, which I can appreciate. You know, my graduating class actually was just a mid-size. You know, it was about 270 or 280 some odd students, but I saw plenty of my classmates kind of slip through the cracks. Whereas here, the graduating classes in high school are 30 or 40 kids, and so very few kids slip through the cracks. They all get a quality education. You know, and then you think of high schools that have 1,000 kids in their graduating class, and you know, or six or 800 or 1,000 kids, and that's really kind of daunting to me because then you're just kind of a number. So I guess despite the cultural diversity, I guess there is a flip side to that I think is really attractive, and that is the quality education that comes along with being one out of 30 or 40 kids. You know, everybody. There's a lot of accountability, and the teachers are plenty available for assisting students, and the local high school is rated one of the top in the country. And then just seeing, you know, a lot of the kids that I know just have a very strong work ethic, I think, in comparison to, you know, perhaps the average well-to-do, affluent, and this is a very large generalization, I understand, but I guess, you know, from my experience, I feel like the average kid around here has a much greater work ethic that they've just, you know, internalized growing up on a farm. It's just kind of the way it is. You have to earn your money a bit more, and you're not necessarily given as many things. And that's, you know, obviously that's a generalization. That doesn't always hold true, but I feel like as far as what I've experienced personally, that's kind of that holds true, and so I can really appreciate that about just this sort of the next generation that rural areas breed is I think a very strong one, capable one.
Thank you.